I was obsessed in the paranormal. My bed vibrating at night, cabinets opening and closing. I had toys that would float out and then fall to the ground in front of me, things flying around the house. She would play with Bucky, and she turned around and said, "Mommy, Bucky died when he was 5.5 years old." I lay down to go to sleep, and in my ear, I hear the voice say my name. It said, "Angie." My name is Angie, and this is my testimony. I have felt compelled for a very long time to give my testimony on the past and the things that have led me to where I am now in Christ. I was really into the darkness. I did a lot of things. I was obsessed in the paranormal. And so I'm gonna kind of let you guys know what happened to me during this whole time, which was a large majority of my life. I was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. I was given up for adoption by my biological mother. She was young and just made the choice, which was the best at the time for her, and adopted by a couple who couldn't have children. My mom and dad. My dad has passed on now. I was raised Catholic, and we were practicing Catholics when it comes to going to mass every week. But other than that, there was no Bible teaching. We didn't study the Bible at home. We didn't pray before meals. It was really just going to mass once a week. And essentially all I really knew were just the most basic children's stories, and I didn't even know them. My life with my parents was difficult. I was adopted, and I have a sister who was adopted as well. We are not biological sisters, but 2 years before me. And my parents, and I don't want to disrespect them at all in saying this, but I kind of feel like it is important in what led me to my testimony. I don't think they expected to adopt me. I think it happened, and I won't go into details on that. I don't want to say they didn't love me, but they loved my sister a lot. They had her on a pedestal, and there was a lot of abuse, emotional and physical abuse. The majority of that came from my mother. The only love I got out of my mom and dad growing up was from my father, and that was rare. My mom was mentally ill, bipolar, with psychosis, actually. The psychosis part didn't come until later. He had to go along with her, or he would get in trouble with her, and he feared her in the way that I feared her. He didn't fear her in a physical sense, but mentally, what she could do, the damage that she could inflict on people just with her words. It cut like a knife, and that was just with the words. Belittled constantly, being told I was nothing, the beatings, having my sister on this pedestal, hearing, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Throughout my life, it made me very insecure. There wasn't a night I didn't go to sleep or lie in bed praying to God like he was my best friend. I just talked to him every night, and I begged him. I thought for some reason that if I could just meet my biological mother, that she could somehow swoop in and save me and make everything better. So I prayed every night, that I could just meet my real mom and dad. Anyway, so I did have like a relationship with Jesus at the time. And that foundation stuck with me. At one point, the abuse got so bad that the state did take me. They took custody of me and my parents. I'm not even sure what they had to do to get me back, but they did get me back eventually. So I moved back home by the time I was 15, and I had missed basically over a year of school because the schooling in the, children home system is really bad. So when I came back to school, not only was I feeling just lost and broken, but I also felt really dumb because I just was so behind. I didn't, things like that is what led me to smoking pot. So I smoked weed a lot as a child, a teenager. I mean, every day. When I was younger, I would have a lot of feelings paranormally. We moved into this house, a new house, when I was 9, and I felt these presences. That's the only way to describe it. And I didn't even know what that was then. I was so young, and I never watched anything really spooky, or, there wasn't a lot of horror movies that I had access to or anything like that. But there were times that I had these experiences in this house that I knew weren't normal. I felt things like my bed vibrating at night. It was just this weird, constant vibration, and it would scare me. So I would try to stop breathing for a minute. I would hold my breath to make sure that it wasn't the rise, of my chest breathing that was causing this. And I would hear cabinets in the bathroom opening and closing. And I remember running to my parents and telling them, because I was scared. And they would always just say, it's just your imagination. You're tired, you're dreaming, whatever. But even though I knew that wasn't true, I still questioned if imaginations could really do that. Then things started to move a little bit. I had toys that I had this little shelf, and it would float out and then fall to the ground in front of me. And again, I was told it was my imagination, and that it really scared me. But as I got older, I realized more that, I know this isn't my imagination now. I know what imagination is. I was a kid that used my imagination constantly. So I was aware. And I started meeting other people in school that would talk about spiritual or my house is haunted, that type of stuff. And for some reason, it drew me in so much. I don't know if it was because I needed validation for what I was experiencing, but I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to know more. It just grabbed me. The paranormal subject was huge for me, and all things paranormal. So that includes like New Age and things like Bigfoot, all those types of things. Are really skinwalking, skinwalkers, all of that stuff really had a grasp on me. I loved it. I loved the unknown. The mystery of the unknown was what pulled me in to this direction. I never owned a Ouija board, but my friend did, and she brought it to our house. And it was very powerful experience, and the first one where I was actually able to communicate or thought I could. We were in the bathroom, and that's where I heard a lot of the cabinets opening and closing. We sat down, and before the things started moving, there was a smell of electricity. And we both put our hands on the planchet, and we felt electricity in our fingers. And my friend actually started crying because it freaked her out so much. And the board spelled a name, and then it just went off. And that experience is the first one that made me feel like I wasn't crazy. I sensed such evil in that house when I was probably 10 years old. This is just an example. If my parents had left me alone, I would be sitting on a couch in the living room, and there was a hallway off to the right. And I would just feel like, I would be fine watching TV with no feelings, nothing, nothing had my attention except the TV. And then suddenly I would feel this strong sensation that something was coming, and it was evil. Just downright evil feeling, this dark, oppressive, scary feeling was coming. Like I felt like it was coming to the hall, which was very, very terrifying for me as a child. So those are the types of things that led me to pursue this more. Then I met my husband when I was 17. Well, I had met him prior. We were kind of friends. I had a big crush on him, and we ended up getting together then. And I'll never forget having a conversation with him on the phone. And this is my ex-husband, not my current husband. But he told me about some experiences that he had had. And he and some friends and one brother of his were involved in some Satanism when he was younger. And it caused a lot of activity to be happening in his house. And they actually had to have a priest come and exorcise the house. So that just really spiked my interest. Again, it led me to validation. So I got pregnant at 17. And from there, my life just kind of was one crazy thing after another, after another. In every house I've ever lived in, there has been activity. And I don't know, I used to think it was a gift. I used to think that this was something that God gave me, that I was supposed to pursue it. And after I had my child, my son, my first son, we got our first apartment. And it was an older house. It was probably about 100 years old. And this was in 1994. In March, we moved out. And I noticed immediately sort of that I felt these weird feelings in there. And again, I was interested in this type of stuff. And back then there wasn't a lot of ways to really look into it. It was just stories and talking to friends and family about their experiences. But I just, again, I had this dark feeling. It was almost like it followed me. So there were experiences that happened there, and it was really really disturbing. Like I would clean the house, and I would put my son's toys up. This is one example. He had this little pair of child sunglasses, and I had just set them down on the shelf. I know I did. It was the very last thing that I put away. And then I went into the restroom, which was around the corner. There was no other way to get there but this way. It was we rented the first floor of the smaller house. And when I got into the bathroom, those glasses were sitting on the back of the toilet. And I didn't understand that. There was another incident where we didn't have a shower. We had a bathtub with no shower head, so we had to bathe instead of showering. But I had bought this little thing that you could connect. It had like a rubber base, and you could connect it to the bathtub faucet, and it would come out like a shower. So we had that, and I kept it behind me, the back of the bathtub. There was a wall, and on that back wall was a towel rack. So I would leave it there. I would hang it because it wouldn't, the top part was so big that when I fed the tube through the towel rack, it would hang. And I was in the bathtub, and this specific time, my husband was there, thankfully, because I was scared to death. It started with this sound that I heard, and the only way to describe it is it sounded like something large spinning. I mean, like if you had like a rope or something and you were swinging it around fast, sounded like that. And it got louder and louder. And then as I was sitting in the tub, something splashed hard in the water behind me. And I turned around, and it was that shower tube, the adapter. And I was just baffled before I started freaking out. And in that moment, when the splash happened, the sound stopped. It was like a build up to what happened. So I grabbed it, and I stood up, and I put it back on the rack the way that I would leave it hanging. And I pulled on it. I twisted it. I did everything I could to make sure that there was no way that thing could naturally fall out before I freaked out, and I mean, it had to have come up into the air and landed in the tub behind me. And the tube on that was probably 3 feet long. I mean, it was a long hose is what I should be saying, not tube. But so that was one of the experiences, which all of these things, they scared me, but that scaring, that fright, that was exciting. It was an exhilarating feeling. Even though I didn't want to experience those things in my house, it sparked something in me every time. So it grew. In that house, we had these neighbors, and there was something strange about them. And again, I don't want to go into too much details, but I do think that this is an important thing to talk about because all of these things led me to getting deeper and deeper and more obsessed. So anyway, so these neighbors, it was like an old couple and then a middle-aged man, probably 40 years old, and a 13-year-old girl. And they lived right next door. And this girl, every time I saw her, the young girl, she called the older people her parents and the middle-aged man her brother, which was weird to me because I was pretty sure that man was her father. And I feel like there was just a lot of deception. And her eyes, I'll never forget this kid's eyes. I wondered if they were drugging her because her pupils were so dilated. I mean, you could see the sliver of blue around the pupil. Her irises were so skinny and thin that I felt something was up there. But in desperation, I ran out of the house one time because I was scared to death. Something had happened, and she just happened to be on the sidewalk outside. And I told her, I mean, I was so scared that I was kind of word vomiting, we'll call it. And I said, do you know who used to live here? Because then I still believed that this was spirit activity. I'm like, something is going on. And she looked at me and she said, my parents keep a book buried in the backyard. So this was unprompted. I don't know if she saw the fear on my face. I maybe said 2 things like, do you know who used to live here? Hoping that I could, I don't know, figure something out, I guess. And that was her response. My parents keep a book buried in the backyard. And then this cat that they had, it was a black cat. ran into my house. And we had two doors. We had a front door that entered the actual home, and then there was another door that went directly into my apartment. And when you first entered the house, there was a stairway, and there was a couple that lived upstairs, a mother and a child, and they were from Asia. They didn't understand a lot of what I was saying, so I knew that really wasn't an option to talk to them about stuff. But that cat ran directly into my house, and since I ran out, I had left my apartment door open. I tore that house apart looking for that cat. We didn't have much furniture, and I was, pretty clean. I mean, everything was in order and clean. So it didn't take much to tear, there's only so many places the cat could have been in. I couldn't find it. My husband was working third shift at the time, so I was left alone, which was horrible for me at that time. But I remember being in bed and being awakened the morning after that cat ran into the house. And since the first floor was made into an apartment, it wasn't originally bedrooms. We had these giant French cherry, wood sliding doors, pocket doors that went into the walls, and the ceilings were 12 feet high. So they're giant doors in my bedroom. That was my bedroom door. And I had the door closed. I had my son in the bed with me because I just didn't want him sleeping in his room by himself with all this stuff going on. And I was awakened by the sound of this cat growling. It wasn't meowing. This was like a howling growl. And I opened up the French doors, and it was sitting dead center. My husband and I, ex-husband and I, had dyed this little carpet that we had bought for the living room. It was a rug. We had dyed it black, and it was sitting dead center of that rug, looking towards the wall where we had our TV, but it was looking up in the air, like at the ceiling, just this evil growl and yowl. And, when I started walking towards it, it ran and it went into my son's room. My son's room was tiny, and I couldn't find it. I lifted up the bed. I looked everywhere. All he had in there was a dresser and a bed. There was no toys on the floor, nothing. It was totally clean. I am looking and I'm just baffled. Where could it have gone? I still don't know. So for 3 nights in a row, that happened. 3:30 in the morning, every single morning, the sound of that cat growling, would wake me up at 3:30. So the weekend came and my ex-husband wasn't working, and we tore the house apart. We had to find that cat. So this was back when they may still make toddler beds like this, but we had like a type of little Tyke's bed or something. It was plastic. That's his toddler bed. We lifted it up. The cat wasn't under there. And we picked up the bed, and the way that the feet of this bed was like there were holes up under the bed. And this cat had no water. We didn't have any pets at the time. We weren't allowed to have pets. So there was no water dishes around. There was no food. And it was under my son's bed. And I know it sounds crazy, but I do feel like that cat was being manipulated by whatever was going on next door. And when we grabbed that thing and got it out of the house, it fought us like videos that you would see on YouTube or something of a cat just going ballistic. I mean, it took everything I had to hold on to it to get it out of the house. And I feel like something happened there with that, because after that, things got worse. I remember being in the car. I can't remember what kind of errand I was running, but I went to get in the car. And as soon as I walked out the door, I felt like there was a presence with me. This is the first time this type of thing had ever happened to me. I was by myself. I went and I got in the car, and I just kept trying to blow it off like it's just me. I'm just being paranoid. I can't tell you how scary that was for me. It was in the car with me. I knew it was. I could feel it so strong. Then I heard these sounds, like a whispering voice. I don't know. It was terrifying. With every breath I took, it felt like, it was weird. It felt like a burning sensation. Every time I breathed in, it went in a little further and a little further and a little further. And I was coughing and just I was scared. So when I got back, because my ex-husband had dealt with all the stuff in his house where he grew up, and this priest had given him, when they did the exorcism of the house, which didn't ever completely work, by the way, because there were still small amounts of things going on in that house that all of his family, he was one of 7 children, and all of them experienced it. All of them would openly talk about it, if it came up, but it was so weird. It was just like some normal thing for them. But the priest that did the cleansing of the house had given my husband this necklace. I have never seen anything like this before, but it was like a circle with these broken lines in the middle of it. And he told me that he gave him that necklace to protect him. So he gave it to me after I came back, and he was praying for me, in a Catholic way, because they were also Catholic. I don't want to say I felt possessed, but I was definitely oppressed, and something was with me very close on that trip. So that was the one time, other than the crescendo and what happened in the very end, that I felt like something was really trying to get in me. So fast forward to when we left the place and we ended up moving into a townhouse about a year and a half later, and I had gotten pregnant with our second child. And this was a brand new townhouse. It had just been built. We were the very first people to move in this place, and things began to happen there. Even though it was a brand new place, it was just activity, little things all the time. It felt like something kicked my bed one night really, really hard. A lot of things knocking on doors. My son, when he was 3 years old, in the middle of the night, and again, this is such a concern to me, and I'll never forget it. And I hate that I have to live on not knowing what really happened. He wasn't the type of kid that would just leave the house. But there was a knock on my door at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was my neighbor with my son. My son had left the house. I don't even know how he unlocked the door and got out. I didn't think he knew how to do that. But he had walked out in the middle of the night, and the neighbor saw him behind the dumpster, which was not really close. I mean, I could see it from our front door, but he walked pretty far. And when I brought him in the house, he kept talking about somebody. He kept using a name. And his pajamas were wet like he was in the tall grass, which would have been in the field behind our house. I feel like he was led out there by something paranormal. And I would question him, and he was very, very intelligent, had an incredible vocabulary for his age. He just said there was a guy named Michael, and that he led him out, and then he was gone. And then James tried to come back and couldn't remember which townhouse was his because they were so similar looking. And thank God my neighbor found him. I, of course, questioned him to make sure that he was okay. But of course, we installed some locks high up on the door so he could not get out after that. But that was just another incident. And now, during this time, we had a lot of issues, my ex-husband and we separated. And I got with my third child's father, and we looked for a house to buy, and we bought a house. Once again, this started again in that house. And I will say that when he moved in with me in the townhouse, he did not believe in anything like this at all. He just totally skeptic, which I totally understand. But I kept telling him, I'm telling you, things are happening, and I don't understand it or why, because in my mind, I thought that hauntings, I did believe in demonic activity, but I also believed that human spirits roamed the earth and, could be lost or had unfinished business, or all the stories that we've been told when we've all heard these types of ghost stories, and it didn't make sense to me because they were brand new buildings. So he just didn't buy it, but he was there when the bed got kicked. I mean, it felt like some grown, strong man hauled off and kicked the bed. The whole bed moved, and he was terrified. He jumped up and, said some dirty words. He was so scared. But anyway, so fast forward to the house we moved into. Things started happening there, and it was strong, like very, very thick. Whatever this was, I felt it. I felt it in my chest. And that's one thing I want to point out. Like, I always felt this like physical feeling in my chest. I could feel when there were things around. So things started happening there. And it turned out that relationship did not work out. I was blessed to be able to get away. And I want to say my daughter's father has gotten help since then and things are going well. So this was early 2000s was when ghost shows were becoming really popular and I was obsessed. When that started, coming on in the internet and things like that, I was able to pay for that and we had a computer and I was able to start really diving into the paranormal world. So ghost hunting was really big. And then, I learned things from that, like how to do EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, and how to hunt, taking pictures, even with the phone camera, things could pop up on there. And it just grew. I mean, all of those little things that had happened leading up to this point, every bit of it was just like another little cuff, on my spirit and on my soul. It just pulled me in, like something had a rope around me and was just pulling me towards it. So it grew and it grew and it grew to the point where the paranormal activity in my house was so regular that, and I was kind of like the neighborhood mom. So my three children, all of their friends were always at my house. I was a young mother, and with the way that I grew up, I didn't really experience childhood like, people should. So I was kind of a kid with my kids. I was very active with them. I had tricked myself into thinking that this was okay. I thought that I had a gift. But things started getting dangerous. Things flying around the house daily, whether it was a wine glass or a cup, a glass in general. When you'd open the cabinet in the kitchen, a glass would fly out. That was not an unusual occurrence. And it would fly out with such force that it would shatter on the wall behind us. Dishes moving, at night. I would think there was somebody in the kitchen. Nobody was there. Knocks. And it didn't just happen at night. This was all day long. So when these other kids were at my house, that may have even been part of the reason that my house was the place to be for these kids, because it was a thrill for them. They came over and they experienced something. But watching these shows, becoming obsessed, and then at this point I had cable, was able to pay for that. And we had a VHS player and a DVD player. So horror movies. I was obsessed with that stuff, especially if they were spiritual horror movies, like hauntings, demonic activity, all of it. And during my obsession and watching all these shows religiously, I mean, and it got to the point where every time you turn the TV, there was a show like that on. It wasn't like that at first. So all of these things just built up and built up. And as I was doing this and watching these shows and watching the horror movies and all the kids coming over, and it was almost the subject of every day, the main subject that we talked about every day. And I hadn't really made the connection yet that I was inviting it in with my interest. So we were going to graveyards. We had a very large graveyard in Cincinnati. I think it may be the third largest in the country, but it's called Spring Grove Cemetery. We hung out there all the time. And I am ashamed. It breaks my heart to say that I involved my children in this. I thought I was being a cool mom. I didn't understand that. I thought I had a gift. I knew at this point that I was attracting it somehow, attracting all of this behavior, all of it. I would always go to the Festival of Light. Every 3 months they have these in Cincinnati at a convention center. And it's like a psychic festival, and there's everything there. I mean, every new age thing you can think of. There's paranormal people, there's ghost hunters, there's, past life regression people, there's a lot of psychics, there's, aura photography, all of that stuff is there. So I made sure I went to those as often as I could because I felt like I was learning something. And with, of course, the gift thing, people were coming up to me, random, that I'd never met these people. This had happened 3 different times. And every time it was just as shocking as it was thrilling. I had this one lady at my job. She came up to me, older lady, and I'd never seen her before. She had never came in. She said, "Honey, you attract ghosts like moths to a light." That terrified me and thrilled me at the same time. I was just super excited about that and scared because even though I did this stuff, I would go hunting for it. I mean, I'd be in the graveyards recording, trying to catch EVPs. essentially doing seances without even, just talking to the dead, asking if anything's around, can you give me a sign? All of that kind of stuff. And I got it. But I did it outside the house. I didn't want any Ouija board in my home. I didn't ask questions in my home, even though I knew there were entities there. I did nothing in my own home that I felt would attract things into our home, but it didn't matter. It was getting dangerous. So some of you people might understand what I'm about to tell you, but this is when things started kind of turning for me, when I started getting really scared. We had a dresser in the bedroom. My kids had it. We all had dressers, but my children had this dresser. It was actually mine when I was younger. And it was the long, not tall, it was the wide ones. But sitting on top of this long dresser, it wasn't a mirror like you see often today. There was a whole nother section that sat on top of that. And there was like a cabinet on each side and then like a big, pretty thing in the middle. So the cabinets, when you opened them, there were shelves on the inside. So my kids had books and all kinds of stuff on this. And this piece of furniture sat directly on top of the dresser. It was meant to. So one night, the dresser, I was awakened by a crash that was so loud that I thought something had broken through the wall from outside. And I ran and the girls were screaming and I ran into their room. I mean, this is a heavy piece of furniture, probably 70 pounds or more. I mean, old school stuff, like solid wood, somehow came off the top of the dresser. It wasn't not centered. This thing was like, it takes force. It's not like somebody, their bed was nowhere near this dresser, not within, like if they were to roll over, they would hit it with their arm. This thing fell off. I mean, it could have killed them if it had hit them, if this had happened when they were awake. And that was really scary to me. So around the time that this dresser thing had happened, it was in that same time frame, so probably around 2007. My husband and I had gotten together, and we had started dating, and he eventually moved in. And this is my current husband. And he was a skeptic as well, but I had kind of drawn him in. I had recorded some ghost hunting shows with pretty compelling evidence, and that just fascinated him. So I had dragged him in this with me, and he was going to the graveyards with me and things like that. We would seek it. We did everything we could. We heard about this place that's kind of local to us, not far from us, called Bobby Mackey's, this bar and restaurant that was, it's been featured on a lot of ghost shows, and we went there. So, we did everything. So I'm sure these things were probably attaching to me and coming back on the daily. There were remote controls flying around the room, sounds. There were whistles, like disembodied whistles that, if it was just my husband and I in the house at the time, we would hear a whistle and there was nobody there. We would check. You would smell the smell of sulfur, which I knew that was evil based on, the ghost shows and everything I had watched. I had learned a lot about signs of evil. I had the knowledge I thought that I had the knowledge that there was a difference between the demonic and human spirits. I had seen what I thought was ghost children. You would hear the sound of little footprints, little feet running in the house. It would feel like that, if I was laying in bed with my husband watching TV before we fell asleep, it would feel like the distinct how a kid, if they were standing on your bed, a toddler, would fall to their butt and bounce onto the floor. And that would happen. Like you would feel the bounce on the bed and then hear the sound of the feet hitting the wood floor. So my son at this point is, probably 15, 14 years old. My daughter is 12 or 13, and my youngest daughter is also, 10 or 11. So they're experiencing all this with us. And it was starting to get dangerous and things were getting scary. So there were little handprints. This is insane. I still don't know how this happened, but in my son's room, there were handprints. It still baffles me. And they looked like they were scorched into my son's wall. but they looked like a baby. I mean, not even a toddler, like a 4 or 5 month old baby sized handprints. I mean, from the base of the hand to the fingertips, they were about this big. And they were set in a way like this on my son's wall. That this still absolutely blows my mind. But so he was scared. We were all pretty scared. And it got to the point that we were all sleeping in my room. Not all the time, but when the activity was high and after that dresser thing happened, I mean, just the danger was pretty scary. We also had a box that we had a closet in the hallway. It was a big closet, a storage closet. And I had a box filled with photos. I mean, the box probably weighed 35 or 40 pounds. Same thing happened in the middle of the night. There was a big boom, and I ran out. We all ran out of our bedrooms to see this box on the floor in the hallway. So knowing that this thing was starting to grow in power and strength scared me to death. So at times we would sleep in the same room, and I'll never forget it would almost make it mad because one night we were all in the same bed and I awoke to my bedroom door, and all of us were in the bedroom. My bedroom door was opening slam, open slam, open slam, and that's what woke me up, the sound of the door, and I jumped up and I see it opening and slamming shut. It was terrifying. And I want to say that this stuff affected my youngest daughter a lot. When this was happening, the opening and slamming, she was about 9 or 10 years old. But when she was a toddler and we were living in this house, like she would play, I almost said her name, she would play with something called Bucky. She would call him Bucky. And she would sit on the floor. I mean, she wasn't even able to complete sentences yet. She was, almost 2 years old. And she would say his name. We don't know anybody with that name. That's not a name that's, a term or a name that we use ever. Like, can't even think of a cartoon or a show or anything that she would have been watching. So she's sitting there playing with this. And I mean, it was really like she was interacting with somebody. And here I am thinking, oh, at first I thought it was an imaginary friend, but then I'm like, she's way too young for that. So I realized that she may be playing with a spirit. And I am so ashamed to say that this, I thought, was pretty cool. Wow, she's got the gift or whatever. And then one day she turned to me. She was saying words at this point, like mama, hungry, that kind of thing, not full sentences. But she turned around. She was doing that, sitting on the floor playing with Bucky. And she turned around and said, Mommy, Bucky died when he was 5.5 years old. And I just felt my heart drop in my chest. It scared me to death. So I do think that that's an important part to my testimony because through the years, I would wake up in the middle of the night and my daughter would be standing over my bed, staring, just with this just blank but evil look on her face, like her eyes, what was in her eyes just looked wrong. And she would just stand there. And I don't know how long she'd been standing there for, but my husband, and it was almost like the weight of her stare would wake us up. And my husband would just make this crazy noise because it would wake her up and he would just be terrified because she's just standing there staring at us. So that was happening on a regular basis, 2 or 3 times a week at least. And then that movie, Paranormal Activity, came out. So I watched that, and I don't know who's seen it, but the same type of thing was going on in that movie. So before it even came out, my daughter was already doing that, standing over our bed and staring at us. And again, no idea how long she was standing there. So I tried to pray over her a lot. I prayed over my house a lot. We had even called professionals in, ghost hunting people essentially. And we had a woman come over who I didn't realize at the time, but she was a witch. She came and did a crystal grid, anything for protection at this point. So I'm smudging on the daily, which is burning sage, all through the house. Followed the instructions exactly as I was told by everything I looked up on the internet, starting in one room, leaving the very last room that I was going to be in, a window open there, and going to the corners of every room in the entire house and ending in that room and then closing the window. Seemed to help a little bit. But after a couple days, it would get worse. It would come back with a vengeance. I did walk around the house and I prayed but the prayer was repetitious. It was like saying the Our Father without even really thinking of it. It wasn't from the heart at all. It was not from the heart. It was just repetition. Going through every room of the house, speaking Our Father who art in heaven, saying things that I was suggested by people in my past to say, praying for a band of angels to watch over us, but my heart wasn't there. I know Jesus knew me and I knew him like a friend, but I wasn't giving him anything. I wasn't doing anything for him. Everything that I did in my life was against him, really, and I didn't realize it, but I was still praying to him. And I didn't understand, why he wasn't protecting me all while I'm here going out, you know, looking for the stuff, getting thrills out of it, showing my friends, spreading this evil by, hey, listen to the EVP that I caught. This is so crazy. Listen to this. So I was spreading darkness and expecting the light to protect me, and that's not okay. I started experiencing with all of the stuff going on, and just keep in mind, I am only giving you guys like the biggest things, some of the biggest things that have happened. I mean, again, there's just countless things. I started experiencing sleep paralysis. So that started happening. And all the while going to these psychic things, I was learning I wanted to hone in. I wanted to know what my abilities were because I had these gifts. So I started doing light meditations and I was incorporating Jesus into it. Like I had this line that I wouldn't cross. Like I knew that at some point that I would be teetering on the edge of witchcraft, and in my mind and in my belief, I didn't want to do that. Like I somehow knew better than to cross that line. Although I had bought books on witchcraft and I would read about it because I was interested in it, but I wouldn't practice any of it, even though I didn't realize the whole time that's basically, talking to the dead is a form of witchcraft. Pagan stuff, But anyway, so I had this line that I wouldn't cross, not knowing that that was crossing the line. But I'm doing these light meditations, envisioning lights coming in, bright lights, different colors, going through chakras, breathing them out through my mouth, bringing them in through my nose. I did the white light one more than anything. And in my little, thing, I would make sure that I like meditated Jesus being there. And after I started doing that, I started having visions when I was awake. Like I would be awake and I would have this whole thing, happen to me. And there were aliens in my vision, which is really creepy. But I would see them in a distance. There would be there was always three figures, and they looked like gray aliens standing there. But it was just like their silhouette because there'd be some kind of light behind them. But I could tell by the shape that they were like what people, the normal gray alien shape, But the light or whatever was behind them would always come through their eyes, like there were holes for their eyes. Every time that would happen, and I wasn't wanting that to happen, that was just something that was happening. I didn't really have an interest in aliens and stuff. I mean, I was excited by it, but not near as much as, the spirit world, which I do believe that they're a part of the spirit world. But they would get closer to me with every different vision. And before I knew it, the last one I did, this was the very last white light meditation I did because it scared me. I wasn't sleeping. These aren't dreams. These are visions that are happening while I'm awake in the middle of these meditations. And they appeared over me. I was lying in my bed and all three, one of them, the one that was in the front was like hovering over me like this. And that scared me pretty bad. So, and there were a lot of other visions too that didn't involve that. There were like 3 or 4 of those and they got closer every time. But so what I'm saying is all these things that I was doing was just like making this veil, personal veil for me between the spirit world and me, thinner and thinner and thinner. So I was experiencing all this stuff. And the woman that came out to help me, that I said was a witch, put a crystal grid around my house at the time. So she put crystals in the 4 corners on the inside of my house and then in the 4 corners of my property on my house and said, well, this will help. But nothing helped, obviously. So the turning point, the paranormal turning point. This isn't even when I, came to a saving knowledge. It was Easter Sunday, and my kids came, they went to their dad's. They got home, and we were in the bedroom. They walked into my bedroom. It was dark at this point, and they wanted to show me their Easter baskets. As soon as she walked in the room, I had inside of my closet, there were two shelves above the clothes rack, and on those shelves, I used it like a bookshelf. So I had all these books lined up neatly on the shelf, pushed back against the wall. So there were three books, well, two books and a picture that I had in that row of books. One was called Just Like Jesus, and the other one was actually a New Age book about archangels, which at the time I didn't know that was New Age. I was totally into that because for me that just tied my belief in Jesus with what I was doing, really making me feel like it was more okay, dealing with the New Age and this angel stuff I didn't even realize yet. And there was a portrait. It was like a painting portrait that was given to my father when his father died of, through the Catholic Church. So it was a portrait of Jesus in a frame. It was like a 8 by 10 size frame. And on the back of this portrait, there was a prayer. Like I get, how Catholic, if you go to a Catholic funeral, you get the little cards and there's always a prayer that the family chooses which one was on the back of this. And it was yellowed. I mean, it was so old that the paper was yellowed, but it was on there. So they walk into the room with their Easter baskets, and the moment she says, Mommy, all three of those things flew out of the closet. They weren't even side by side, but they flew out and they hit my daughter. So I picked up that portrait of Jesus and I hung it on the wall. There was one empty nail, and I immediately hung it on the wall. And that was the day that my fear turned into anger. And this is just in the house, So I mean, like I said, I was always trying to be careful in the house with the spirit stuff, like not trying to do any type of calling them or hearing or EVPs. I didn't want to catch anything, in the house. So I hung it on the wall, and the fear turned to anger at that point. And I said, you are not welcome here. You need to leave, just like they tell you in the ghost shows and stuff to do. Well, that night we went to sleep, and I woke up in the morning and the picture was still hanging on the wall. And that prayer, that old yellowed prayer that had been on the back of that picture forever, sitting in my closet, was lying in shreds on the floor. Little tiny shredded pieces, this big, all over the floor with the picture still hanging on the wall. And the edges of this paper looked like it had been chewed by a rodent or something. It was the craziest thing. And that was, again, when I got mad. So from that point moving forward, things slowed down. It wasn't as frequent. Like the frequency of these occurrences was getting less and less, gradually less and less. Then we had to move. So 15 years I spent in that house, and it was like from the moment we moved in to the moment we moved out, there was a peak in the middle, and in that middle was like the heightened point of all of the horrible, evil paranormal. I saw entities in that house as well, like full-bodied entities, and I would see a shadow in that house every single night. It didn't really have a shape. It was a black shadow. You could see through it, but it was clear. It was visible. I mean, it wasn't just me, And this shadow moved fast. I mean, I'm sure if there's anybody who has experienced anything like this, they know what I'm talking about, because these things move super fast. And I would see it in my bedroom every single night when I was lying there trying to go to sleep. My husband he's one of those people that can go to sleep like that. The moment his head hits the pillow, within less than a minute, he's snoring. So I would wake him up. Did you see that? Did you see that? No, he never saw it. And it would just fly fast, almost like doing like a figure eight around the room, but really fast. Like it would fly around one corner of the room and then come back around and go around that side of the room. And then one night he finally saw it. I'll never forget. And this particular night I told him, because I always felt it. I would feel these things before, they were always there. This night I felt it coming, and I said to my husband, he'll even tell you, I said, I don't know what this is. I said, I am not saying it's paranormal, but I really feel like something's going to happen tonight. So that night was the night he was laying there. He starts rubbing his eyes like this, and then he says, Baby, I'm pretty sure I just saw what you say you've been seeing. And as soon as he said that, I saw it fly in front of the mirror. So I said, it just flew in front of the mirror. He was like, it did, you know. So finally he saw it. He had like one other thing happen to him. He never saw the entities. He did hear the EVPs. So he was, you know, always skeptical, but at this point, finally believing me. And that night, the entire section, like one section of the room in front of the bedroom door. At first, we had a gap above and below the door where you could see light from the hallway coming through. And something blocked the light at the top of the door, you know, too high for it to be anything, you know, I don't know, it's weird, but not at the bottom. So we both saw that. And then that feeling just got stronger and stronger and thicker and like oppressive. Then there was a darkness, like this shadow, but it looked almost like smoke, but it just started getting thicker and thicker and thicker from the floor to the ceiling, right inside of our bedroom door, turned almost black. You couldn't see through it. It was almost like this black smoke. And that was immediately after we saw the, you know, the cracks being blocked on the outside. So that's some of the things that happened. And then I started to get scratched. I would see that little shadow entity running around. And this was when things were, you know, dying down some, but the occurrences got stronger. Like we wouldn't see it as much, but they got stronger. Like they were able to do more to me. So I got scratched on the face and I had these 3 welts on my face for over a week and it felt like poison. That's the only way to describe it. It didn't feel like a normal scratch. It felt like if somebody dipped their fingernails into poison ivy before they scratched me. That's what it felt like. So then we moved. We moved to the horse farm that we lived on. And again, you know, here it starts again. All the stuff, paranormal stuff, seeing things, the feelings. And I also feel like whatever was following me was following me, but whatever kind of evil was around that area was attracted to me. And we stayed very busy at this point because we were doing a lot of work. So I didn't really have time to go running around, go graveyards and all of that stuff. And my older 2 children had moved out at this point. So my daughter, my youngest, and my husband's son, who was the youngest of our 4 kids total, were with us in this house. And that's when I tried to back off from it because I knew at this point that I was attracting it. So I wasn't going to places actively trying to record voices and stuff anymore. I was still watching the ghost shows. But in this house, it got real. For instance, I woke up in sleep paralysis and I couldn't move. And I felt something. I had a larger dog at the time and she never jumped on the bed. But it was the only way logically that I could explain what I was feeling. I felt behind me and I was turned, you know, my husband and I were both facing the same direction. We were facing the right and I was behind him. So we were spooning, but we were sleeping and my arm was over his side. We were both laying on our sides. And I felt, and again, I was awake in sleep paralysis, couldn't move, couldn't speak. That's scary enough the way it is. For any of you who have experienced that, it's pretty terrifying. And I felt a weight behind me on my bed, like pushing down the mattress right behind me. And I thought to myself, what is Raspberry, my dog, doing? You know, like jumped up on the bed with her front paws. That's the only explanation that I could think of. And then it like felt like the hand went up onto my side of whatever this was. And that's when I started panicking because it's like its hands were on my side because my side was up in the air and it started and I could feel like it felt like it had these claws that went down to my belly button and my spine. And it felt like this thing was trying to pull me off of the bed. I mean, this was a tangible, physical thing that was happening to me. And I know there's a lot of people who are going to say you were dreaming, you were whatever, but this happened. And when it realized it didn't have the strength to pull me backwards off the bed, and I did feel like I was moving just a little tiny bit at a time, but then instead it started pushing me down into the bed. And I am just absolutely terrified. So I'm trying to pray, but trying to make this stop, trying to make myself, it almost feels like your soul is disconnected from your body, but it's still in there. That's the only way I get, like, I've used that to describe the feeling of having sleep paralysis several times. But so I'm like looking because I can see through my eyes. I can see my hand on my husband's waist and I see my pinky. I'm like, wiggle your pinky, wiggle your finger, which is wiggle, trying to will myself to move because I knew once I had control again of my body that I would come out of it. And then I saw it. I saw my pinky barely move. And I was like, instantly just, and I was able to breathe. And I sat up and I screamed my husband's name. And he sat up and it was just horrible. So around this stage, and again, remember, I'm praying this whole time to God. And I always addressed him, God, Lord, Lord, God. I never really used the name Jesus, but sometime in between this whole move, between the house that we lived on before we moved to the farm, I'm starting to really question at this point if what I'm doing is wrong, if, this really isn't of God, if this really isn't a gift, what if it's evil? And what's weird about that is I was praying a lot. And I never prayed for things. I prayed for things like strength, to better me. And I prayed to be humbled. And this was before the move to the farm. I prayed to be humbled. And it was there that I decided, because we all, at this point, we had smartphones for the first time ever. I used my phone and I looked up if there was anything in the Bible that said whether or not it was okay to be talking to the dead, or be a medium, essentially. And that's where I found that the Bible did in fact say that he despises, the word despise, hates and despises those people who try to communicate with the dead. That really got me, like that rooted itself in me. And I was kind of like reasoning with people, like, I believe in God, I believe in the God of the Bible, but I think the Bible is just more like signs, and we're not supposed to, like, it's not literal. So about that time before we moved to the farm, I had paid off my house, but I had school loans that defaulted. So I put my house in my dad's name, and my dad filed bankruptcy, and I lost my paid off house because of his debt. So that's why we moved to the farm. And on the farm, we lived there and worked the farm in exchange for our rent. After about 6 months living on the farm, and again, I'm kind of teetering. I am walking the line at this point. I'm on the fence. As I said, I always believed in God and Jesus, but I believe I made him what I wanted him to be. I created a Jesus in my own religion that made it okay for me to be doing these things that he despised. I just created my own form of Jesus, and he was Jesus, so I guess that was okay to me, which is ridiculous. But it got worse on that farm. The scariest things were happening to me on a spiritual level. So the things that were happening in the other house with the items moving and things, that was a different kind of scary because I knew that could physically hurt somebody, which is horrifying. But this was like deep evil, just downright evil things happening to me. And I cleaned houses for a living on top of working on the horse farm. So I drove a lot. This is the turning point, the big turning point. I'm on my way, and I cried out to God. I just felt like I didn't want to betray him, because if that were real and the God in the Bible is true, I didn't want to betray him anymore. I wanted to live for him because of what he had done for me. So I'm driving, and I cried out behind the wheel. I said, Lord, if you are real, and I am not supposed to be doing this, and the Bible is true, and I shouldn't be talking to the dead and talking to ghosts and ghost hunting and everything that I'm doing, if this is wrong and I should not be doing this, give me a sign. And the moment that came out of my mouth, I see in the distance an orange reflective surface. It's an orange spot. And as I'm getting closer to it, I'm on a highway at this point, so I'm going pretty fast. And as it comes closer and I can make out what it is a big fluorescent orange sign in the shape of a cross that says, Jesus loves you. I was like, oh, what? That can't be. No way. That's just a coincidence. There's no way. So I did it again. I was like, God, seriously, I need you to give me a sign if you want me to stop doing this stuff. If I'm not supposed to be. And as soon as I finished that statement, I see another orange spot in the distance, getting closer to me, and it's the same sign. Orange reflective highway type of sign in the shape of a cross. says, Jesus loves you. I couldn't believe it. So I'm like, whoa, because I knew those weren't there before. I knew they weren't. So I get to the house that I'm going to. And as if I hadn't tested them enough at this point, I get to the house and I have a tool, a ghost hunting tool on my phone, and it is an EMF detector. So I take the base reading in the car. I'm still sitting in the car. Take the base reading and I pick a number after I'd seen the base reading. I don't remember what it was, but it was way off the base reading number, like by the hundreds. And I picked that number and I said, God, if that was you, you don't want me doing this anymore. Make it go to this number, whatever. And I said the number and it immediately went to that number and it held there until I said, okay. So when I said, okay, I believe you, I believe, that was the moment I stopped everything. I'd never watched another ghost show. I never watched another horror story, a horror film, nothing. I believed him and I knew that I had to walk away. Then I started realizing the truth of everything. Satan comes disguised as an angel of light. What more of a perfect deception than to pull people in to his realm and hold them there by pretending to be the ghost of a child that needs to be released, or by pretending that, it's a loved one that has passed on. My best friend that passed away, when that happened, things were happening the night that she died, and I thought it was her giving me a sign. But the truth is, absent from the body, present with the Lord. So these things, there's no children on this earth. There's no spiritual children here. If you're under the age of accountability and you pass away, you're going straight to heaven. You're not going to be roaming the earth. You're not going to be a disembodied spirit with unfinished business when you're 3 years old. So these things, these realizations start hitting. I'm starting to read the Bible at this point, and he's drawing me in, and I understand things like why they call it the living word, because things are speaking to me in ways. He's speaking to my heart, like my heart was softened and he entered my heart, and he let me know. I mean, he was speaking to me. But because I had been so deep into this darkness, this straight up world of Satan, for so long, there was a lot of attachment, which is the whole reason that I wanted to do this. And I feel led, and God has been leading me to do a testimony like this, despite my fears of glorifying Satan, despite my fears of all these things. I want to let you people know who are where I was before, whether you believe or don't believe in God. If you are doing that, you are doing the devil's work, honestly. If you're searching for spirit, you're searching for evil spirit, because unless you're seeking God himself, not angels, not praying to angels, not praying to you're only him. If you're doing that kind of stuff, it's so dangerous. I mean, not only are you pulling in, just even if you don't believe me, if you just question yourself, what if that's right? Which is what I started doing. I started questioning it in myself after I prayed to be humbled from the heart. I meant that prayer. So after I turned my back on all of that and dove into God, and I experienced that day when he gave me the signs, I felt him. I understand what it's like to be on the other side of this, the back side of it, where no one could tell me because I thought I knew. I had dealt with so many things, so many tangible spiritual things that happened to me on a physical level, visual, tangible, audible. I heard voices growling all the time. Evil, horrible, disembodied growling was a regular thing in my life. And the kids heard all of this stuff too. We all lived in a constant state of fear. And I cannot tell you how much I regret that. These were my children. I raised them in a darkness that is hard to describe. And I thought I was being a cool mom. I really did. I bought my daughter her first deck of tarot cards. And that kills me. And it just kills me. I repent every day of that. And I feel terrible about it. And I tell them how sorry I am. They know that I wish I had known better. I wish I had known the truth. They've experienced things that they should have never gone through as children. I was the kid that was afraid of the monster that I knew was literally under the bed, but they were the kids that their mom put the monster under the bed. That's ridiculous. I wouldn't play the Ouija board in my house, but one of the kids, neighborhood kids, they had one, and I would go down to the creek in the woods with them and play it with them as their mother. That is just crazy to me. Once I turned my back on everything, there was a huge fight. These things really showed their true colors then. Some of them always did, but a lot of them pretended to be children, pretended to be whatever they wanted to be, whether it was my dead grandmother or whatever, or somebody else, or talking to me, or repeating something in an EVP that had happened earlier in the day in the room. But as soon as I turned my back on it, things got ugly. This is the big thing. And I'm just going to say it. Remember how I said that the woman came up to me and said, honey, you attract ghosts like moths to a light. That happened to me 3 times. And 2 of those occasions, 2 out of those 3 times, the people, totally different people that didn't know each other, said to me that they saw a woman with me that looked just like me, but like 20 years older, which is weird that they said that. So I'm kind of a demon, I'm sure. There's a night, my husband and I, we got done with our work and we decided to go to Golden Corral, the buffet. So we get there. This is real. This is not a dream. This is really what happened. We get there and we eat. And my husband, as always, I mean, everyone stuffs themselves at those things, right? But my husband overstuffed himself. Like he ate a lot. And so that's what made me logically think that that had to be what caused this. So we get home and my husband starts walking asleep, but his eyes were open and he was walking around the room like sleep talking, but he never laid down to go to sleep. He was just walking around talking complete nonsense. I've never seen him do anything like this before. So I really just thought he had eaten himself into a stupor. That's the only logical explanation. And I was trying to get him to lay down because it was freaking me out. Now I'm going to back up just a little bit because leading up to this, I had a voice that was audibly happening about once a week at this time, and it sounded like a female voice, and it would just say my name. When I would lay down to go to sleep, it sounded like it was right next to me, and it would say, Angie. So that was still happening. May have been the night before or 2 nights before the big thing happened. My daughter called me, and she was just talking to me, and all of a sudden, my daughter starts whispering really fast. This is the one, by the way, that played with Bucky. And at first, logically, my logical mind, I thought that she had a guest at her house because she had moved out at the point. I thought she had a guest at her house and that she was whispering to the guest as to not be rude to me. Then the whispering got faster and weirder. I want to imitate it so you guys can understand why this was terrifying, but I won't. But it was really fast female whispering. Then I started being able to comprehend some of the words here and there, and they were evil. It sounded like it was a different language. It sounded like it was like ancient Aramaic or something weird. And then I heard certain words like possession. I heard the words Satan, Lucifer, and at this point, I'm screaming her name, freaking out, saying, why are you doing that? Why are you whispering? What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Right? And then, because it escalated to that. It wasn't like I immediately started saying that. What are you doing? Why are you saying that? Hey, what's going on? It escalated like that. And then out of the blue, all of a sudden, she just yells, Mom! And I'm like, why were you doing that? She said, your stupid phone blacked out again. She was mad because there was times when, I'd be in a place where I didn't have great reception. But she said my stupid phone had blacked out again and I lost reception, and she was mad at me because I couldn't hear what she was saying. But she didn't realize that whatever that was had separated the phone call and it was talking to me. It wasn't her at all the whole time. So after that happened, I basically heard this voice say that it was going to possess me, and I knew that it was evil. Back to the Golden Corral night. My husband finally got him to lay down after the wandering around, talking in his sleep, awake, with his eyes open, never having laid down at all. So I get him to lay down, and I lay down to go to sleep. And this was a Saturday night when this happened. I lay down to go to sleep, and in my ear, I hear the voice say my name, but this time it said Angie, like that, like taunting and angry, scary. And I fell asleep. You have to remember, like that's kind of, it was scary, but not, I mean, I had already been through so much stuff. So I was like, oh, that's creepy, but I fell asleep. And this is going to sound crazy. And I know that a lot of you will say, well, you were just dreaming. And I was. It's true. I was dreaming. But the Bible tells us that we can be spoken to through dreams. And I'm telling you, this happened to me, and it began with the dream. And it set the night up so that my husband could not help me. My husband is still not quite a believer yet. He believes in spirit activity, but he is not a surrendered to Christ Christian yet. And he wasn't then either. But still, if he had woken up and been aware of what was going on, he may have been able to help me. I don't know. But for whatever reason, it got to him first to make him unable to be conscious enough to help me. So I lay down, I go to sleep. After I hear the Angie, I go to sleep, and it's weird. I'm with an old friend that really does exist. And in my dream, somebody in her family had passed away, and I had gone to the funeral with her, and it was dark, and we followed her back to this house. So I go into the base. She tells me to go on into the basement family room. It was a nice house. Go into the family room. I'm with my husband, and she said, I'll be in a minute. So we go into this basement finished family room, and there is like a hallway with like a closet. And the only light on in this room was in the closet. And I get that familiar feeling. My husband and I are just standing there in front of this couch that I know something's there, and I know it's evil, and it's probably the most evil thing I've ever felt. So I start getting scared, and I'm standing kind of like behind my husband, and then we hear this sound coming from the closet where there was a light, this evil, gurgly, growling sound, and it's getting louder and louder, and it's almost pulsating, like with the noise it was making. It was like, ugh, ugh. And that sound was getting louder and louder and louder. And I got so scared in my dream. I looked at my husband, and he was scared. He's never scared in real life. Like nothing has ever really scared him. Like he was intrigued by it and a little bit disturbed by it, but never like frightened like that. He's a manly man. So I grabbed him. I put my arms around his waist in my dream, and I sat down on the couch, and I pulled him on top of me because I felt like, I don't know, I wanted to be covered by him because he makes me feel safe. And I said, don't worry, honey, I'm going to stop it in my dream. So I started saying the Our Father out loud. This time I am saying it from the heart because, I understand what I'm saying now. So I start saying it, and I'm like, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And as I'm saying that, I'm losing control of my body, and I can't speak anymore. The words aren't coming out. And I'm like, and then this sound started coming out of my mouth. In my mouth, like it was like somebody was holding my chin and my head tilted back like that. My head tilted back, forcing my mouth open. And this thing comes around the corner, and it's just blackness, like this cloud of black. And it just goes into my mouth and into my body. And I wake up, and I'm horrified, and I can feel this thing in me still, even though I'm awake. So I feel this erratic, staticky, terrifying. I don't even know how. It's like a evil electricity course, and I could feel it pulsing through my body, like going through my arms and into my fingertips and back up. I mean, it's just like moving in me. And I have these thoughts that aren't my own, in addition to my own. Of course, I wake up my husband right away. So all this stuff happens immediately, and I had to like wake up, realize it was a dream. I'm processing it, and I'm like, it's still in me. What is this? And I'm like trying to shake it out. I'm praying, trying to shake it out. Wake up my husband, and he is still in this dream state. He can't do anything, can't even comfort. He just doesn't, he's still talking like he's in the seventh grade, talking to his teacher like he's dreaming. It was the weirdest thing ever. Now, I don't know how I did it, but I was so horrified. I had to go back to sleep to try to forget it. And I kept telling myself, maybe if you go back to sleep, maybe it is just a dream. Maybe this will go away, and you wake up just like if you go to sleep with a pain and you wake up and it's gone. So I've made myself go back to sleep. And I woke up Sunday morning, and it was still there. I felt it. I had my own thoughts and something else, And I'm like, I got to go to church. So, and I was actively going to church at this time with my best friend's mom. I was embarrassed because it's not easy to tell somebody that. And again, she had known what I was doing in the paranormal. I mean, she knew that I was obsessed with that I've known her since I was like 4 years old. So she knew. But I finally break down and tell her. And it was during worship that I told her. We had probably got through one song. And she said, just sing worship with your heart and we'll praying. And as I'm trying to sing and worship, it was like something was stopping me from singing these words, glorifying God. I mean, I forced it out, but then I started feeling very sick, very nauseous, like I was going to vomit. But I somehow made it through. I sat there the whole time because I just wanted this thing to go. The whole time I felt like I was going to throw up. So she's praying for me on and off. And when it's over, I just want to run. Like I had the urge to run. And I loved this church. I loved going to church. I loved it. It was a spirit-filled church. I was happy there, but I wanted to get out because it was something else. So I get out and I talk to her. And it was really weird because the woman that was in my dream, my good friend that the beginning of that dream, the funeral that I went to with her, um, she lived down the street from me when I lived in the house where all of the bad stuff started happening, before we moved to the farm. She also, her and her children, my children were friends with her children, and they were experiencing all kinds of evil paranormal activity as well, like things that were insane, like tangible, horrifying things. I mean, they even like a kid that was down there one time saw that she said the devil. And this was during one of her kids' birthday parties. So they have been through a lot. I knew I could confide in her and she wouldn't think I was crazy. So I told both the friend that I went to church with and her that lived, my neighbor friend, and they both gave me the same Bible verses to go home and recite and pray and get it all out, and to try to remove this from me. And they said that they were going to be praying for me too. So I go home to the farm and I get there. So I am on my knees, absolutely horrified, with my Bible open, praying my own prayer, all while I'm feeling sick and I have these weird voices in my head, like saying horrible things that I won't repeat. I'm reading actually Ephesians 6, which is the full armor of God. And so I'm sitting here, saying these prayers from the bottom of my heart. And then I feel something starting to happen. So I get up off of my knees and I'm standing there. And I'm standing with my arms out like this and just standing while I'm still praying. And I feel that horrible, erratic, evil electricity start coming up from my fingers, moving up my arms at the same time and from my toes. So it's coming up from both my arms and my legs at the same time, from the tips of my fingers and toes. And it's coming up and it all gathered together in my stomach right here. Like, and I can feel it balled, like a ball of just erratic, straight demonic evil in my stomach. And then all of a sudden it felt like it was swelling, like my stomach was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I felt it coming up and I opened my mouth. It was so crazy. It was the same way that it came in through the dream. And I opened my mouth and it came out my mouth and it was gone. And I just collapsed back to my knees and just praised the Lord, tearfully crying. I mean, it was horrifying. That is the kind of stuff that looking into the paranormal and being obsessed and watching horror movies and asking for it, essentially, that's what you're doing. If you're watching those shows, you're opening doors. You're inviting these things into your life inadvertently. A lot of you might not even know that can happen, but it can. And if you take it to the next level like I did, you're really, really allowing it. You're allowing these things into you and your family's lives and your home. And since then, I have not had one more experience. Nothing else has happened. It is gone from my life. That was the final fight. There are times where I feel like I have had small experiences or something trying to get at me or get in, but nothing has gotten in. And I know how to protect myself now. And the first step is to eliminate all of that stuff from your life permanently and follow God, because I am telling you, it is the truest truth The Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit are the truest truth that I have ever known. And I always say, for some reason, I say it's something that happens to you, because before this, I believed. But when those signs came to me and he really, it's like I surrendered to him in that moment. I didn't even know that's what I was doing, but I did. And he filled me with his presence. And there is no going back now. Like, there's no one, I don't care what nobody's going to talk me out of it, because I 100% without a doubt know that that is the one true living God. He is the only way, the truth, and the life. He is it. And he will let you know. I mean, if you cry out to him, here's the key. If you cry out to him and you ask him to show you something, but you don't get an answer, it's because you're not ready or willing to let go of the things that you know that you're doing that aren't for him, or they're against him. He knew in that moment that if he answered me, that I was going to walk away from all of it. And I did, and he filled me, and I'm still struggling with certain things. I'm not perfect. My walk is still, still happening, as all of ours is. And I welcome you all to put it to the test. Cry out to him from a place in your heart that you truly want to know, because you have to have it in your heart. If you don't cry out to him and it's just, some form of sarcasm, or you're really not interested, you have to be ready, and you have to open your heart and know that that's what you need, and he will help you. He doesn't want to lose anyone. He wants everybody to be in heaven with him. He is a loving father, and that is the way we're supposed to view him. He loves you so much. And the fear that we're supposed to have towards him is the same way we would fear our father when we know we're doing something wrong. You know what I mean? You're doing something wrong to our fathers on earth, our earthly fathers. We had this fear of getting in trouble. That is the fear, but it's a much bigger level, because if we don't accept him, and he's so clear about it. It's not like he wants us to go to hell. He's giving us the choice, and free will is all about it. He wants you to choose him. He doesn't want to force you. He wants you to love him because you want to love him. And basically what I have to say. And I have other things that have happened, and I have had dreams that I feel like I know 100% are from the Lord. And I don't know, maybe another time I'll talk about that. I'm not very good yet at like praying out loud for people, but I do want to say a prayer for all of the viewers. Heavenly Father, I lift all the viewers today up to you, Lord. I ask that you touch all of their hearts. I ask that you bless them and show them the truth, give them discernment, let them know if they're doing something that is not of you. Give them conviction so that they know and have a sense to cry out to you the way that I did. I ask that you protect those, Lord, that may still be involved with any type of new age, pagan, witchcraft, paranormal obsessions like I was. I pray that you reach them. You send people that you know will be able to plant seeds in their heart so that they will grow before it's too late. I lift all of their families up to you. I lift my family up to you. I pray that you bless them all and give them the knowledge of your existence and cultivate their hearts so that they can accept the seed when it is planted. And I thank you, Lord. I thank you for this podcast. And I thank you for you and your word and everything you've done for all of us and our families and our loved ones, Lord. And I just want to say thank you.